I think we should look at this graph. This graph shows the money that all countries in the world spend on their military. With the current geopolitical tensions, such as Trump's invasion of Iran and Venezuela, countries are beginning to inject more money into their military budgets.
Well, opinion polling here in Germany indicates there's strong support among Germans for increasing the country's military budget.
The question that I keep asking myself is, why do we spend so much money preparing for wars rather than solving real issues like hunger, unemployment, housing, and poverty? This year alone, over 318 million people are expected to face a hunger crisis. In 2024, global military expenditure reached $2.7 trillion. Yes, you heard it right, trillions, not billions. Yet, ending world hunger will only cost 1% of that amount. If we were to eradicate hunger across the world by 2030, we will only need $330 billion. In Africa, it's even easier because $5 billion is all it takes to make hunger a story of the past. Today, if African countries called a meeting in Addis and decided to pool resources towards eradicating hunger, it would be a matter of seconds. That's funny, right? But as simple as it sounds, no single government or person in power is willing to take the bold step. My concern in this video is, how come African leaders never solve the issues their people go through despite having everything it takes? Talk of proxy wars in Sudan, hunger in Somalia, poor housing in Kenya, unemployment in Nigeria, you name them. The list is endless. I dug into the archives and arrived at one answer. The answer is simple. The people in power actually benefit from instability. Let me explain how. This year, over 55 million people in West and Central Africa could face a hunger crisis. However, Nigeria is in a bigger trouble. Nigeria is at the top of the list with 31.8 million people in acute food insecurity. It is followed by Sudan, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Yemen, Afghanistan, Myanmar, Pakistan, and Syria. Hunger is largely caused by climate change, such as droughts that wipe out livestock and crops. However, if you go deeper, elites and governments are cashing in on the chaos. In Somalia, corruption has become the norm. Aid pours in billions from the European Union and the United Nations. But most of this aid gets siphoned off by warlords, officials, and some crooked contractors. Somalia is ranked as the world's most corrupt country, and the situation does not seem to change soon. Clan leaders and elites in Mogadishu hoard relief supplies and sell them on the black market or use them to secure loyalty. At the same time, Al-Shabaab extremists perpetuate hunger by stealing food, water, and medicines. They control food and recruit desperate kids with promises of food. It's a whole vicious cycle. Hunger causes instability, which justifies more aid, which goes into the pockets of a few. Another issue that politicians will never solve, no matter how much they promise, is unemployment. Nigeria is a good example here. Nigeria is considered the giant of Africa economic-wise. However, youth unemployment in this country is a ticking bomb just waiting to explode. The issue of unemployment makes it hard for people to get food. In 2026 alone, over 35 million Nigerians are expected to struggle with hunger. This is especially because of the lack of jobs, as well as the expected cut in donations from Europe and the United States. What makes things worse in Nigeria is corruption. Nigeria, being an oil-dependent nation, is expected to create jobs. However, that is not the case. Young people are used by politicians as thugs during elections. Due to a lack of jobs, many of them are forced into crime. I did my research across various reports. I discovered that increase in population outpaced job creation. Rural-urban migration also overwhelms cities. In cities like Lagos, you will find kids working in informal jobs just to make ends meet. Generally, 97.9% of young adults in West Africa are unemployed, with most of them sustained by the informal sector. The oil money is enough to solve Nigerian problems. However, nothing seems to be happening, at least towards that direction. The proceeds of oil benefit a few elites, while the rest keep languishing in poverty. Nigeria should be at the forefront of job creation in Africa. However, the reality is harsh, as millions of young people remain trapped in unemployment. Have you ever wondered why in bustling cities like Nairobi, slums are full of people while shiny, high-rise apartments sit half empty? 61% of urban Kenyans live in slums, paying exorbitantly for poor houses. According to the World Bank, Kenya has a housing deficit of more than 2 million units, and the number keeps growing annually. To address this issue, the Affordable Housing Program promises to deliver 200,000 units every year. This sounds like a good idea. However, the affordable tag is a joke for people living in poverty. Besides, corruption is a huge stumbling block due to land grabs by elites, bribes for permits, and diversion of funds. County governments are tasked with delivery. However, they lack both resources and will, mainly because officials profit from informal settlements. The housing projects appear as a deliberate tool to help solve the housing issue, but this is very far from reality. This is due to the fact that crises like housing, poverty, hunger, diseases, and many others are what keep politicians in control. These crises create fear, causing people to rely on government handouts. For instance, floods displace thousands in Nairobi every year. However, no real infrastructure is set up to fix the issue. If restrictions were eased, the private sector could help reduce some of these challenges. Nevertheless, that can never happen because everything is calculated here. Someone must benefit from others' suffering. If there is one playbook for how politicians turn other people's sufferings into their own gain, it will be proxy wars. Sudan and Somalia are perfect examples of this. The civil war in Sudan, raging since 2023, has left over 25 million people hungry and others displaced. The war is not just internal, it's a whole chain of global players scrambling for riches and power. Sudan's war is largely funded by entities in the United Arab Emirates who benefit from gold imports. In fact, during this war period, there has been a 70% increase in gold business between Sudan and the United Arab Emirates. Countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Turkey are secretly funding the RSF, intending to perpetuate their fight with the army. On the surface, the war in Sudan seems simple. However, a lot of countries are involved. Peace talks always fail because stability in Sudan means the collapse of some empires. If these countries wanted to help Sudan end the war, it will take fractions of the money they are using to supply the RSF with weapons. They keep funding the RSF because they want the war to continue. If the war stops, their gold deals will collapse almost immediately. The people in power do not care how many people die in war or out of hunger, as long as they keep getting what they want. That is why politicians, even if they are able to stop crises, never act in the right way. Right now, a mother in Juba stares at her children, wondering what to feed them tonight. A young man in Lagos refreshes his email again and again, hoping to see a reply from a job application. Still no reply, still no hope. Millions in Sudan go to bed on empty stomachs because someone powerful hijacked the food convoy for their own gain. In Somalia, desperate kids join jihadist groups just for a promise of one meal. In Kibra, Right here in Nairobi, thousands of families cling to leaking tin roofs, gazing at those shiny high-rise apartments across the valley that the government has promised them. This is not bad luck. It is a system wired on purpose. Dig into any crisis, hunger, joblessness, slums, war, and you will find the same truth. Someone powerful is cashing in. Aid disappears into private accounts. Oil billions vanish while youth rot unemployed. Land gets grabbed, gold smuggled, and tenders inflated. Even the COVID-19 pandemic, which claimed the lives of so many Kenyans and left broken families, somehow gave us COVID millionaires, politicians and insiders who turned emergency funds into mansions and offshore fortunes while hospitals begged for medical supplies. Our leaders have the power to stop all this chaos, but they deliberately choose not to because this is their business model. They know that instability keeps people weak, dependent, and voting out of fear. The real question should not be why African leaders behave like that. Instead, we should start asking ourselves, for how long are we willing to let them eat while we starve?